Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I want to turn to Ben Rhodes. He's a former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama. Ned Price is also with us, a former CIA analyst and a former Senior Director for President Obama's National Security Council. They're both MSNBC contributors. Also with us, Nicholas Kristof, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Times, who has written extensively on foreign affairs. Ben Rhodes, your reaction to this breaking news?
Well, it's astonishing. I've never heard of anything like this. And it should be deeply troubling to Americans that essentially somebody in the intelligence community seems to think that the President of the United States is a danger to American national security. And when I think about what this could be, the only things I can consider are, one, you had President Trump actually revealing something sensitive about U.S. intelligence collection to a foreign leader, which we know, by the way, he's done already in a meeting with the Russians early in his administration. Or secondly, he was taking some action that was, profoundly not in the interest of the United States, making some promise to act against perhaps the will of legislation or current U.S. foreign policy. Whatever this was of such a gravity that this person felt compelled to come forward. And the other thing that I think we have to confront here, Lawrence, is a lot of people in this administration know things that President Trump has done or is doing that are deeply worrying. I'd like to see more of them come forward. We've seen people leave and write books, and we've seen people leave and kind of make vague insinuations that there are troubling things happening in the White House. This is a matter of national security. This is something that could be putting the interests of the United States gravely at risk. And we see the administration acting in ways that go against the law to try to repress that information. This is a time to get the sunlight on this information so that the American people can make a judgment. And this is why, by the way, you have intelligence committees. They were set up, this from having worked on the Hill. They were set up precisely so that you had a venue for oversight, because in the past, when you didn't have intelligence committees, you had huge abuses of power by the executive branch. This is precisely why you have congressional oversight of intelligence.
I want to read that section of the law that Ellen was just talking about, the definition of urgent concern. The employee who filed this whistleblower report had to have what the law calls an urgent concern. The law is very specific that an urgent concern does not mean a difference of opinion about policy. Here is how the law defines urgent concern. The term urgent concern means any of the following: one, a serious or flagrant problem, abuse, violation, or law, or executive order or deficiency relating to the funding, administration, or operations of an intelligence activity involving classified information, but does not include differences of opinions concerning public policy matters. Ned Price, I want to get your reaction to this story as we know it at this hour.
Lawrence, I think there's a maxim we can attach to this administration. It could always be worse. It could always get worse. I'm actually not sure that's true in this case, however. I will be honest that when I started to hear about this story, these rumblings, I had assumed that there was a whistleblower within the intelligence community who was ready to tell superiors about President Trump or someone in his administration's severe mishandling of classified information. After all, this is a president who, in recent weeks alone, has tweeted highly classified classified satellite imagery, has leaked information to the Russians in the Oval Office, has detailed the locations of nuclear submarines to foreign leaders. But I certainly don't think that's what the case. That would be recklessness. That would be carelessness. I think this could be something closer to betrayal, given what we have learned from the Washington Post this evening. And it's always dangerous to speculate on the origins of potential wrongdoing during this administration because there's so much of it to go around. But let me offer one theory that I think comports with the second line of thought that Ben put forward. I've always been curious about a July 31st phone call between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. This is a phone call that President Trump himself initiated, July 31st, the dog days of summer. The White House, after the Kremlin did, put out a readout that said they discussed potential American assistance to ongoing Siberian wildfires. That raised my curiosity even more. President Trump was barely lifting a finger to fight ongoing wildfires in California. The Kremlin readout, however, added something quite different. It said, quote, that the Russian president viewed Trump's offer as a sign that fully fledged bilateral relations could be restored in the future. The Russians seemed to have an indication that President Trump had pledged or promised a restoration of diplomatic relations, of bilateral relations, in a way that the White House certainly didn't allude to in its readout. And this was precisely 2 weeks before the whistleblower filed this report.
Yeah, Nick, the whistleblower, as Ellen reports in the Washington Post tonight, the whistleblower's report was filed on August 12th. And so Ned Price and others now are staring at everything we can find publicly about Trump communications with foreign leaders in proximity to August 12th, prior to August 12th.
And indeed, that July 31st phone call with President Putin does stand out for obvious reasons. Look, the number of people within the intelligence community who would be privy to the contents of that call is fairly limited. These are senior people with presumably good judgment who are not going to risk their careers, make a mountain out of a molehill, out of something that indeed does not rise to that. The Inspector General, in turn, is not also going to elevate something that is not a serious case. And that suggests this does not involve...
Just to stop on that for a second, there's two thresholds. An employee, a serious level employee who would have access to this information, is seriously troubled, thinks this is an urgent matter, as the law refers to it, an urgent concern, has an urgent concern, brings that urgent concern to the Inspector General. Yeah. The Inspector General believes this is an urgent concern. If the Inspector General doesn't think it's an urgent concern, just thinks it's an opinion matter, the Inspector General doesn't have to do anything. The Inspector General brings it to the director because it clears all of those thresholds.
I mean, you could also argue that the DNI finds it a sufficiently big concern that he doesn't want to follow the law.
It is Thursday, the 19th of September of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, before we dive into these offerings here on the Bistro Cafe that we have conjured up, no, they were right there, and all we've done is repurpose them for our devilish means. But before we dive into that, I want to remind folks about the season. And what season is that? Well, it is soon to be flu season. And it is vitally important that people make their plans now, because for some folks, it can take up to 14 days or so for the vaccine to reach its peak efficacy. Indeed. So do plan ahead. Probably now is a good time to get your shots. And I had just simply, which I do every season, I remind people to get their shots. But for some reason, that triggered the anti-vax trollbot platoons here in Southern Oregon across many Facebook community pages. And it was quite stunning in the sheer volume of their postings, wanting to get into a debate about the so-called science. So, I entertained it ever so briefly. I just, gave a couple of papers or pages about immunizations at the CDC and the AMA. Of course, that's all propaganda. It's all lies, fake news, fake. So, and then I thought, well, okay, then if that's the way you're going to be, here's some Lancet papers, and here's some from, another peer-reviewed organization or peer-reviewing organization, and no, none of that mattered. But postings from some obscure, what they would also do is that whoever they were, would occasionally post actual government documents showing how vaccines only work over a certain period of time. Well, duh, that's why you have boosters, you stupid idiot. But boosters are also part of the plan by whoever it is that, I don't know, doesn't want us to live in an iron lung. Now, of course, I should also mention that maybe I'm a bit pointed when I remind people to take their shots. And maybe I was poking the bee's nest just to see how many bees would respond. But they came out of the woodwork, so to speak. If one were just alone in the midst of that, if one didn't have a wider circle of information, one could certainly believe by just the sheer volume. I think it's called gish galop. Is that when you get overloaded with all of this meaningless or not pertinent information? It's just loading it on, and by the time you respond to something, then they're loading more on. I think that's called gish galop. One would tire and think, well, maybe I'm the one that is wrong. I mean, maybe getting inoculated is wrong, even though for our whole lives it has saved lives and whole populations. And only recently did this anti-vax movement reach the fervor that it has. And it's important to realize, I know that they say that we have the tinfoil hats on. It's always funny when someone falls for some weird conspiracy calling you the conspiracy person because you bring up facts. One of those facts is that the anti-vax movement is largely funded by hostile foreign actors. And I'm not talking just Vlad, though he's part of it too. And we should be very well aware what that means. Property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. The less population, the less you got to deal with when you partition spoils up among the victors. I know that's some addled conspiracy-minded theory. Of course it is. But Trump's promise to a foreign leader, which might be Vlad, maybe it's Kim. We don't know. I don't think it's the guy from Luxembourg that he pushed out of the way. I don't think they were having a phone call and making promises. So he spoke with a few people on his unsecured phone. He's going to whine, there's a conspiracy against me. They were spying on me. They wiretapped my phone. You're on an unsecured phone, and we're just tired of waiting to hear what the phone call was from the Russian intelligence agencies. Or let's put it this way. It's not even the Russian intelligence agencies. We get to hear about what was spoken about from the Russian media. Everybody listens in on his phone call, but as soon as the people who are tasked with oversight and protecting the United States of America, as soon as they do it, it is a crime. Just to put an exclamation point on the sentence. Trump did not make a promise so much as he betrayed America and sold the United States out. Kind of hard to maybe campaign on that. Though, I have to say, after dealing with his Trump bro MAGA-hatted Colt 45 Trumpettes, they might think it's a perfectly good idea. White utopia? A dream come true. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays? The House GOP tried to remove the word shooting from a bill about school shootings. Don't remind people what it's about. They might want to do something about it. A white supremacist faces federal charges for racially motivated threats that sought to intimidate a black Charlottesville civic leader who is exploring a run for office. And anti-Semitic trolls are creating an online list of Jewish people critical of white nationalism that even 4chan found too toxic. Too toxic for 4chan. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a Tokyo court cleared all 3 former Tepco executives of negligence over the 2011 Fukushima disaster. And a Moscow court freed an anti-Putin protester from custody as school teachers and Orthodox priests demanded authorities rein in the crackdown. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, and it is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our link to our Patreon site. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. For those of you who have been listening for a while, this is a broken record. For those of you who are listening for the first time, you will find out this is almost like a broken record, but it must be stated that without your generosity, we would be unable to continue as Resistance Radio, as we have been resisting for the last 8 years plus. It's our 8-year anniversary of continuous 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio. Resisting as the founders originally intended all those many decades ago. Almost an eon. And thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty of resistance. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam. You can follow me there. And I also post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media for your linking pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Alrighty. Oh, I should remind folks, I went on a spiel about the anti-vax troll bots earlier on here. I just need to remind folks, get your shots. Get them. Now would be a good time, as Dr. Greg Dworkin, who has retired, but he knows. Get him now. Alrighty, let's start off with the first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. That's always a good place to start. And it comes out of Share Blue Media by Dan Desai Martin. North Carolina Representative Virginia Fox and her fellow Republicans on the House Education Committee. They put Virginia Fox on the Education Committee. Well, I already knew that, but I'm just acting astounded, because I'm still astounded that Virginia Fox is on the Education Committee. Well, they failed Wednesday to remove references to school shootings from a bill designed to collect information on school shootings. You know, sort of like your doctor can't ask you if there's a gun in the house, and if there is, how to safely secure it around your child. They made that illegal because it might scare the parents. The committee was discussing H.R. 4301, a bill that would require the Departments of Education, Justice, and Health and Human Services to publish an annual report on school crime and safety, including data on school shootings. But Fox was not having it. She offered an amendment that stripped out all references to school shootings, arguing that collecting information about children being shot was too complex. Well, it might be complex for Virginia Fox, but to normal educated people, it's certainly quite accessible. Democrats on the committee were taken aback by an effort to water down a bill meant to protect children from gun violence. What are my Republican colleagues simply afraid of? Representative Lucy McBath, a Democrat of Georgia, who is a congresswoman who lost her only son to gun violence. Oh, parenthetical, how did her son die? A guy was upset when he pulled into a gas station convenience store, traveling through, and the kids are parked on the far corner of this place while another couple of their friends are getting refreshments and snacks. They're sitting in their car listening to music and having a talk, visiting. And this guy could not stand the fact that a carload of black kids were playing music in his space, mobile though it be. And he went over there and filled that car up with lead and killed her son. And then he and his little girlfriend, I think maybe she might have been a tree growing off of his shoulder, Ethel. Well, Billy the Mountain and Ethel decided, we're going to eat our snacks at the Howard Johnson Motel. And they did. And then they watched news reports about him shooting this kid and killing him simply for listening to music and talking to his friends. That was her son. And she ran for office and won. And what does the NRA and the ghouls of the Repug Party refer to her as? A pandering person using the death of her son to pass liberal socialism. In the end, Fox's amendment was defeated by a 25-22 vote, with Republicans lining up in support and Democrats opposing. The bill passed the committee by a 27-22 vote, making the next step a vote by the full House. In February, the full House passed 2 pieces of gun safety legislation, the first such bills in a generation. While both received some support from Republicans, both passed despite overwhelming opposition from the GOP and unanimous support from the Democrats. But those bills have been blocked by Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch McConnell for more than 200 days. Tyranny need of Talking Points memo brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. A white supremacist known for his extreme and harassing conduct online faces federal charges for racially motivated threats that prosecutors say sought to intimidate a black Charlottesville community activist who was considering running for office. Daniel McMahon was arrested in Florida on Wednesday yesterday. He has been charged with interference with a candidate for elective office, bias-motivated interference with a candidate for elective office, and threats in interstate commerce and cyberstalking. Both the indictment and superseding indictment that were unsealed on Wednesday were extremely vague about the nature and content of McMahon's allegedly threatening online communications. The superseding indictment alleged that by threat of force and violence, McMahon used the internet and his social media accounts to intimidate and interfere with the prospective candidate's campaign. The indictment identifies McMahon's target as DG, an African-American Charlottesville resident who planned to announce his candidacy for city council at a January 8th event, but who instead announced at the event he would not be running. That description fits Don Gathers, who co-founded Charlottesville's Black Lives Matter chapter and who also has advocated for the renaming of Confederate monuments. Oh, a little troublemaker. At the time, Gathers' decision to drop out of the city council race was described in local news reports as being related to health concerns to his life by outside actors from outside the state, by the way. In a press release, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Virginia alleged that the threats were threats made with the intent to injure and intimidate DG and were part of a course of conduct that caused DG to fear death and serious bodily injury. McMahon's hate-filled online presence has been well documented by white supremacy watchdogs and even by a college newspaper that claimed its student journalists were harassed by McMahon's online persona as he sought high-definition photographs of students protesting Confederate monuments. McMahon was in federal court in Tampa on Wednesday yesterday for a hearing on whether he should be released on bail. The hearing will continue on Monday. McMahon's defense attorney, Nicholas Mattasini Jr., told TPM that McMahon is being held at the Pinellas County Jail in the meantime. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Anti-Semitic trolls are creating an online list of Jewish people who are critical of white nationalism. Since its creation almost a month ago, it has become the fastest-growing alt-right group on the popular Telegram chat service. The list is mostly made of archived tweets from individuals criticizing white supremacy, misogyny, and other types of bigotry. Each profile includes a tweet in which the person in question describes themselves as Jewish. The first post on the list singled out Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, but posters quickly moved to documenting far less prominent people that they believe are Jewish. The list includes many who are not public figures, who have only modest profiles as rank-and-file activists, journalists, or social media figures. Around a dozen people have been added nearly every day. The chat has been the fastest-growing alt-right public Telegram channel since the start of September. Well, I would say that maybe this is get back for, maybe outing a few Nazis here and there. So they're going to go after who they think are Jewish people. Just do not call them fascists. While the group's creator is pseudonymous, they appear to be a neo-Nazi, according to Oren Segal, the director of the Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism, based on a post they made in September saying they were 14 away from the magic number. Well, Segal believes this is a reference to the channel at the time being 14 away from 1,488 subscribers. Neo-Nazis gave the number significance because 14 is the number of words in a common white supremacist slogan, and 88 is an abbreviation for Heil Hitler. Telegram is known for its deep commitment to free speech and a hands-off approach to private conversation. While Telegram's terms of service are brief, they do acknowledge a difference between chats involving small groups of people and public groups. The channel could be in violation of the platform's rule against promoting violence on publicly viewable Telegram channels, while the channel's creator has written that they are not encouraging violence against anyone on the list. A likely neo-Nazi creating a list of Jewish people is arguably inherently violent. The company did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, more of It. Unlike some sequels, It Chapter 2 was imagined from the get-go when the decision to adapt Stephen King's 1986 novel was made. The action in 2 picks up with the Losers Club, some 27 years later, with a ripped-from-the-headlines type of assault on a Derry resident who survives but is then killed by the evil entity Pennywise. Mike, the only member of the club still residing in town, catches wind of the incident and, per agreement from back in the day, summons the other losers back to town from their varied lives across the country for the epic confrontation we know is coming. A significant portion of the movie's 170-minute runtime is devoted to developing the characters post-Chapter 1, and due to spot-on casting and exquisite execution by the likes of Jessica Chastain as Beverly, Bill Hader as Richie, and James McAvoy as the all-grown-up Bill, it all works pretty well. If taking issue with the running time, it is true that some of the side plots, such as Beverly's developing love triangle and some of the flashbacks from the first one, could probably have been cut to beneficial effect. Focus groups aren't always a bad thing, and if New Line did them after the first picture, they assuredly heard the message, more of Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise, and in Chapter 2, we get it. The clown is sadistic and articulately menacing as the losers try to invoke an untested Native American ritual to finally destroy it. It Chapter 2 is the first big-budget project from Argentine director Andy Muschietti, who gave us 2013's Mama with the support of Guillermo del Toro. Every risk Muschietti takes doesn't pay off, but he takes them, and enough of them do, to assure that it, too, doesn't disappoint. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jared Rizzi. Kids spend a lot of time looking at screens, and some parents worry. But a new study argues against the apprehension parents may feel.
The danger is that they're hearing a message that social media, digital technology use is causing very serious and harmful problems like depression, like suicide-related behaviors.
Candace Odgers, professor of psychological science at the University of California, Irvine.
And the idea is that if you shut off social media, which lots of kids use to connect with each other, their friends, find out information about health, you could in fact be making a situation worse. Parents are really being sent a message that is not supported by anything scientifically.
Odgers and her colleagues looked at the screen-related behavior of 400 public school students in North Carolina, ages 10 to 14. The group was picked as a representative sample of race and socioeconomic status for the entire U.S. The researchers found that even not counting time doing schoolwork on screens, kids spent between almost 5 hours to 7 hours per day on their devices, with older kids online the most. That's a lot of hours, but
overall what we find is no connection between the amount of time that young people spend online using digital technologies and mental health symptoms like depression, anxiety. When we do find associations, they were actually quite surprising to us. We found that young people who sent more text messages actually reported better mental health. Now, again, this was a small association, but it reflects what other people have found, that people who are very connected offline, that use technology in kind of positive ways to stay connected, often are more connected online as well and experiencing kind of better mental health.
The new study is in the journal Clinical Psychological Science. So why the fears about screen time? Odgers argues that the methodologies for older studies may have led to false conclusions.
One of the issues with the research that's been done to date has been that youth are, in school, they have a survey put in front of them, and they're asked to recall over the past 6 months, how often are you online, and have you ever felt depressed? And the correlation between those two things has been used to spread a lot of fear around this connection between social media use and things like depression. 99.5% of the reasons that kids differ in their depression is due to something other than the amount of time that they spend online.
Parents get a lot of advice, and some of it always seems to conflict. But Odgers suggests there's one place you can always go to get information.
The hope is that more parents will hear this message and relax and spend kind of less time worrying about smartphones and more time just talking to their kids.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jared Rizzi.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1981. More than 400,000 union members marched in Labor Day's first Solidarity Day demonstration in Washington, D.C. The demonstration was called by the AFL-CIO to protest the Reagan administration's policies and the firing of striking air traffic controllers. At the beginning of August, nearly 13,000 air traffic controllers had walked out after talks with the Federal Aviation Administration collapsed. At least 7,000 flights were canceled on that day. The Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization wanted an annual wage increase and a reduction in work hours. The FAA counteroffer fell far short of what the union wanted. Reagan declared the strike was illegal and eventually fired every striking Patco worker. President Reagan even went as far as to impose lifetime bans on rehiring any of these workers. The union was decertified in October of 1981. Patco was just the beginning. Reagan's policies were definitely anti-union. union. He put union foes in control of the very agencies that were designed to protect and further the rights and interests of workers. He named Donald Dotson the chairman of the National Labor Relations Board. The NLRB oversees union representation elections and labor management bargaining. Dotson let his opinions on unions known when he said that unionized labor relations have been the major contributors to the decline and failure of once healthy industries and have caused destruction of individual freedom. Under Dotson, the board abandoned its purpose to promote collective bargaining. The NLRB settled only about half as many complaints of employers' illegal actions as the board during the Carter administration. Those that were settled upheld employers in 3/4 of the cases. The Reagan-era anti-union policies and attacks on workers have had serious repercussions that workers are still suffering from to this day.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
For the last few days, we've been hearing about a whistleblower whose warnings have been withheld from Congress by the acting director of national intelligence. The Washington Post tore the wrappings off on Wednesday night, reporting that the complaint involved Donald Trump's communication with a foreign leader that, quote, included a promise that was regarded as so troubling that it prompted an official in the U.S. intelligence community to file a formal whistleblower complaint with the Inspector General for the intelligence community. On Thursday, that very Inspector General, Michael Atkinson of the intelligence community, will testify at a closed-door House hearing about the matter, while acting DNI Joseph McGuire has refused to share details of the whistleblower complaint with lawmakers. He has agreed to testify next week, Thursday, September 26th, in an open session of Congress. Here's more on the story from CNN's Evan Perez.
We know that this began in August 12th when someone came forward with this concern. We know that the Inspector General looked at it and viewed it as credible and of concern and of urgent concern, that the reason why they wanted to alert the committee. What we don't know is exactly what the nature of it is, and again, why the White House would seek to assert privilege, which is, again, what is suggested by the response so far from the Director of National Intelligence. We'll see whether or not we can get a little bit more from the Inspector General and from the Director of National Intelligence. But as long as the White House is drawing the line on this, this is going to be a big fight between Congress and the White House.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Wednesday officially accused Iran of, quote, an act of war for their alleged strike on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. He made the remarks while traveling to Jeddah to consult with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman about how to respond to the attack. For his part, Donald Trump said he wasn't keen to order anything that might embroil the U.S. in military action in the Middle East, and he defended his caution against criticism by some conservatives that the U.S. appears weak to the Iranians. He said, it's a sign of strength.
No, I actually think it's a sign of strength. We have the strongest military in the world now, and I think it's a great sign of strength. It's very easy to attack, but if you ask Lindsey, ask him how did going into the Middle East, how did that work out? And how did going into Iraq work out? So we have a disagreement on that. And, there's plenty of time to do some dastardly things. It's very easy to start. And we'll see what happens.
In Jeddah, Saudi officials displayed what they said was evidence that Iran was responsible for Saturday's missile and drone strikes. Iran continues to deny involvement in the attacks. By the way, if you doubt the veracity of the Trump administration's claims, you're not alone. Japanese Defense Minister Taro Kono told reporters Wednesday that he's not seen any intelligence indicating that Iran was behind those attacks, contradicting Saudi and Trump administration claims. Quote, we are not aware of any information that points to Iran, he said. We believe that the Houthis carried out the attack based on the statement claiming responsibility. And French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said Tuesday that he's not aware of evidence demonstrating Iranian involvement. Quote, up to now, France doesn't have proof permitting it to say these drones came from such and such a place, and I don't know if anyone has proof. We need a strategy of de-escalation for the area, and any move that goes against this de-escalation would be a bad move for the situation in the region.
And isn't it ironic? Don't you think?
While en route to Saudi Arabia, Mike Pence spoke with reporters off camera and offered them some advice, telling reporters to make sure they label those who regularly lie as liars. I'm not making this up. The exchange was about reporting on the Houthis, and here's the direct quote. When you report about them and you say the Houthis said, you should say the well-known frequently lying Houthis have said the following. This is important because you ought not report them as if these truth-tellers, as if these people who aren't completely under the boot of the Iranians and who would not, at the direction of the Iranians, lay claim to attacks that they did not engage in, which clearly was the case here. So there you go. Whenever you say Houthis, you should begin with the well-known, frequently known to lie Houthis, and then you can write whatever it is they say. And that'd be good reporting. Laughter. And I know you care deeply about that good reporting.
And isn't it ironic? Don't you think?
I couldn't make this stuff up. By the way, Donald Trump on Wednesday named his fourth national security advisor, a lawyer who had previously worked with John Bolton and was the special envoy for hostage affairs who oversaw the ASAP Rocky trial in Sweden. Seriously. As the world prepares for Friday's global climate strike, we're in peak hurricane season. Most of Bermuda is in the dark Thursday morning after Hurricane Humberto brushed by the island. About 80% of Bermuda is without power, knocked out by the 120-mile-per-hour winds. That storm has moved farther out into the Atlantic and will weaken and become a post-tropical cyclone by Friday. Meanwhile, Tropical Depression Imelda is slowly making its way to Louisiana after soaking parts of southeastern Texas. Imelda dumped so much rain there that emergency crews had to conduct rescues of people trapped by floodwaters. Well, Israeli elections were held Tuesday, but there's still no definitive answer. The AP is reporting with nearly all votes counted Thursday, the centrist Blue and White Party stood at 33 seats in Israel's 120-seat parliament, while Netanyahu's conservative Likud stood at 31. Neither party can form a government without the support of the election's apparent kingmaker, Avigdor Lieberman of the Yisrael Beteinu party. His insistence on a secular government would force out Netanyahu's traditional allies, the country's two ultra-Orthodox parties and another nationalist religious party. Benny Gantz's Blue and White has pledged not to sit in the same government as Netanyahu. But the fiercely loyal Likud party is unlikely to oust Bibi. Stay tuned. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on the donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we're going to be topping out about 70. Slight chance of a few scattered rain showers this morning, remaining cloudy throughout the day, clearing up possibly overnight with a few passing clouds. Winds will be light and variable throughout the day. And tomorrow with a high maybe of tomorrow in the mid-70s, overnight lows in the mid-50s. Air quality is at 27 parts per million. The daytime UV index is at 5. And we're going to abbreviate this ever so briefly because weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, And these people positively live around the world. London is 70 and sunny. Paris is 70 and sunny. Rome is 72 with a rain shower and a flood advisory. Kiev is 58 degrees and fair. Kabul is 79 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 81 and fair. Tokyo is 72 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 56 and sunny. And New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Tim Kelly and Aaron Sheldrick of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Tokyo court cleared 3 former Tokyo Electric Power, Tepco, executives of negligence for the 2011 Fukushima disaster, the only criminal case to arise out of the world's worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl in 1986. Former Tepco chairman Toshinisha Katsumata and one-time executive Sakeo Muto and Ichiro Takahura were all found not guilty by the Tokyo District Court. A woman sitting in the public gallery where about 100 people were seated shouted "Unbelievable" on hearing the verdict. Outside the court were displaced residents and protesters.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Tim Balmforth, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Moscow court freed an opposition protester from custody yesterday, Wednesday, as school teachers and Orthodox priests told authorities to rein in a crackdown following the biggest anti-Kremlin protests in the capital for years. When they say anti-Kremlin, they mean anti-Putin. Please. The court released Adar Gubadulian, who faced years in jail for assaulting a police officer at a protest last month, and he was set out on bail. His supporters say all he had done was throw a plastic bottle at a police officer and that he missed the target. The court ruled the case should be reviewed by prosecutors, a move the opposition cast as a concession after an array of prominent Russians demanded the release of an actor jailed for 3.5 years on similar charges. Celebrities from film stars to a Eurovision pop singer took to social networks to condemn the conviction of novice actor Pavel Ustinov, protesting that he had not taken part in the rally and had not resisted arrest. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.